talking text hierarchy today. We're putting together our final poster. Before you begin, please set up your document. So as we look into Adobe Illustrator, you begin with an 11 by 17 document. If it is not that, and again, I would create a new one. So you're going to go into create new, and you're going to create an 11 by 17 or a tabloid document. This is for print, so you can select print. That way it will set up, and if you wanted to see if it's in inches here, it will set up so that it's in CMYK. You may also increase the bleed. So one of the things you often do when you create posters, if, for instance, this background, this yellow background, once you want it to go to all the way to the end of the poster, you actually do something called a bleed. And that way, when it is printed, it will print beyond the borders where it'll be cut off. And that way, if there's an error in cutting, you don't have a big white slice that shows that error. And again, 300 pixels per inch when we print. So we are putting in a vector-based document, vector-based artwork. So the upside is, as you begin your document, anything you put in here will print really well if it's a vector. So as we begin at this point, one of the things that you want to do is create your layers and organize your layers. I would say background. I would say your graphics layer or art. And I would say your text layer. So do break up your layers and organize your layers. There is that. If you did make swatches, you could open up those swatches at this point. If you haven't, you do have your colors here that you can always pull from. So for instance, when I pull open my layers panel, one of the things that you'll see is that the background has been, a big rectangle has been dragged over the background just to give it some color. And what I'm doing here then is I am filling that with one of these, so that eyedropper again comes in handy. So you can choose to fill that in, and you can really see the different impact each of these makes in having, I guess, contrast as well as content coming out of your work. So as we begin, I'm going to lock that layer. This is our art layer. This is where we've imported our image. So here is our low poly image. And again, that could actually, that could extend holding shift down so that you don't distort. And I better extend this background. I think I see a problem here, unless that's just, that was just from me moving it out. You might even have it go off the edge of the frame. And so depending on where you're putting your text, and that's why sketching does come in handy. Otherwise, you end up kind of moving things around and shifting things around and doing a lot of, like, I'm not sure. We've downloaded a font already. I've downloaded a font. I'm also thinking about keeping borders here into printable areas. I don't want to be too close to the edge, and I also want to align. So I want to align to the artboard. So I've selected that, and that way when I select center, it will center that text in the center. I've also applied effect on that. You all should at this point be able to go in and warp your text and be able to do stuff like that. And so moving these around, kind of, again, want to find so that there's no tension here. I want to make sure there's space or white space, right? So that I have, some space between the text and the image so that there's not too much tension, as well as the edge of the page. Now, if we look at all the information, and honestly, here is the brochure for this festival, which is a lot to read. And the text hierarchy is pretty awesome. As you look at it, it has the where it's at, Mascata Morel Fest, and it's downtown Mascata. It's Saturday. So you really, readability here is really good. And notice there's serif font. This is more like a script or a kind of just a fun font. And so when you do lots of information like this, it does help to have your font this is serif font. This has gone into sans serif. There's a lot of font going on here. Kind of rule of thumb, just so you know, is 2 fonts to 3 fonts max. If you're using like a heading, is where you want to stay at. There's a lot of ability within a single font to actually change that font depending on what type of font you use. So when you choose your character font, there are within these also other styles that you can use. So Baskerville's kind of, I would say, not where I want to be with my lettering. That might be too thin. The thinness of some of those letters might disappear into the background. You want to also think about contrast, and the color of your font might also change how people read it. So going through all the different fonts and really deciding what you're going to use. Right now, these are all the same font and font size, I should say, font size right now. And again, I'm going to switch into a kind of an overused, but a good font for impact, which is Helvetica. And there's different types of Helvetica. So that's the awesomeness of that. There is a light Helvetica, and there's actually a Helvetica, a new Helvetica. And so you can go in and you can see that there's all kinds of font within that. So right now, in terms of hierarchy, what's the next important thing? And I would think the Muscata, the fact that it's a Muscata is super important. And so I'm going to lock my background, lock my artwork, and deal with my text layer. I'm going to start to move around my text and work with my text. So it is the Morel Festival. It is the Muscata, right? Morel Festival. So at this point, going into my text box, grabbing another text box and typing in and making sure I spell it right. Skoda? It's a question mark. Now I want to use the same Morel font. Believe it or not, the eyedropper will allow you to kind of pick up that same font. Is it as important as Morel Festival? Maybe I bring it down to 100 points. And again, alignment is crucial. So for instance, maybe I put Muscata here. I want to start to think about how things are aligning here and how they would be read if I put it in the center. I definitely want to utilize centering to the artboard. I might even change the color of the font, and that might change how it is read. And again, you can use your eyedropper to grab some of the font that is in here that you might want to use to change the font color. So you can, leaving it with black text against this light background might be readable. Do I want to overlap the text? And this is cool. I mean, you could even go in and create some transparency with this. So there's a lot you can do with font. It is the Muscata Morel Fest. I'm going to bring these down. When I do that, I'm going to select both of them. And then I'm going to keep going into the hierarchy, and aligning to the artboard again is important. So always aligning, not necessarily center align, because a lot of times that looks like the type is just kind of pasted on. It is kind of important to think about how the type and the image work as a whole. So continuing on here, what's next important? How am I going to align it? And just a little bit about that. So in terms of aligning your text, so say I'd start working with this text, I might bring it down to the important thing is the parade will start at 3. But that's beyond the Morel Fest. Let's just go with the next thing, which is the date. So where do I have space? Where is that going to be legible? And so let's say I put it here. Let's kind of keep this area open. And we're going to go to the bottom element here. And then I'm going to change this. I'm going to leave that as like 48 because that's kind of important. And then is entirely outdoors important? It's kind of not as important. So I'm going to bring that down. So one of the things you might just begin with is figuring out how your text is going to be and where it's going to be. As you start to maybe layer text, so let's say I'm going to put down parade at 3 p.m. And there is a lot of information here. And I'm going to put, what is it? The Fireman's Steak Feed. It's famous. We'll begin at 4 p.m. There we go. And again, I'm not going to use novel font. I'm going to use the font that is legible, easy to read. So we're going to go into, again, the same font we've used before. And again, you could just eyedropper it so you can grab that. So it kind of keeps you able to select it. Parade at 3, steak feed. And spell check is going to be important. I'll show you that. Now, as we look at this, there's a couple things I can do with this besides scale it, is look at the alignment. So for instance, maybe I want to right align it. And maybe it's something that goes on this side of the poster. And then the other thing is these are two things that are grouped together because they are kind of highlights of the Morale Fest. There's a lot more information that actually has to come in here. And so one of the things that I would do, and I'm going to really bring this down to 18 point, which, believe it or not, is pretty big type. Let's go 24 actually, just so we can see it a little more. One of the things I might even consider doing is figuring out that I would align these with, and I'm going to drop open the rulers, align them with, go into view and show rulers, drag down an alignment. So I'm going to align this with the text that's on the other side. And again, that text might come down to 36 point, unless I want to put it maybe it's a larger. And I'm going to keep like important things together. So, and I'm going to keep them kind of grouped. So the date and the fact that it's outdoors here. And you may even use your bold. You may even, in terms of kerning this, might go into your window and character. Let's go into our type character. And again, you can bring the letters wider or more narrowly spaced. This is the spacing of the letters themselves. So I can actually bring, how that it looks really big. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll just bring those letters together a little bit, just maintaining their legibility. And so, and again, kind of making sure I'm aligning things here. And maybe even the text height can change. So that's another thing to consider, is you can change the text height. And then the location to each other you can also change. So right now it's on kind of automatic. So notice I can move the text farther and closer to each other. And then again, consider how that aligns with everything. And you may even want to drag out rulers here so you have like a 1/4 inch on each side. So you're kind of thinking about the fact that none of the important elements will ever get chopped off or come off of the poster. So bringing all those elements together. And again, I need to definitely visit aligning those across as well. So one of the things you would do, and I'm going to align it to a key object now. The key object is that. And so align it in terms of aligning it from the bottom, the top. So there's a lot of different ways of aligning and visually weighting out this. Also, the other thing that you might even add in is a piece of texture, and I'll get to that in the next video.